Hi, I'm Bailey McEwen. I'm a sophomore, and I recently learned about symbiotic relationships, and I was very fascinated with this topic. Right now, I'm going to teach you about them and how they affect the community we live in today. Let's start off with the basics. Symbiosis means living together, but in biology terms, symbiotic relationships are associations with two or more organisms, each from a different species, that could not necessarily benefit each other. Symbiotic relationships can either be obligate symbiosis, which is when two organisms are in a symbiotic relationship because they need each other to survive, or facultative symbiosis, which is when organisms or species live together by choice. There are so many examples of symbiotic relationships, from the clownfish living in the sea anemone, which is a mutual relationship because both benefit, or the example of the caterpillar with the larva living all over it, which is parasitism, because the larva would be considered a parasite because one benefits while the other suffers. When both organisms can benefit from the interaction, it's called mutualism. An example of mutualism would be certain bacteria in humans. The bacteria lives in our intestines and helps us to eat. For example, we can eat this ice cream and digest it because of the bacteria in our intestines. Another example of mutualism would be how the relationship between a shrimp and a fish. The shrimp digs a home for both it and the fish to live. In exchange, the fish lets the shrimp know when danger is near because the shrimp is basically blind, so can't see when danger occurs. Here's an image of something similar to that happening. Mutualism is a positive relationship because both benefit from the situation. When one organism benefits and the other suffers, it's called parasitism. An example of parasitism is when a barnacle attached to the body of a whale. The whale is suffering, while the barnacle, which is the parasite, is getting what it needs to stay alive from the whale. Another example is when a flea, demonstrated here, is living in the dog's fur. The dog is itchy and can't do anything about it, while the flea is living off of the dog's blood. Parasitism is a positive-negative relationship because the parasite benefits, while its host suffers. When one organism benefits and the other isn't affected by it at all, it's called commensalism. An example would be a spider building its web on a tree. The spider benefits because now it has a place to live, while the tree isn't affected at all. Another example would be a hermit crab taking an empty shell. The hermit crab benefits because now it has a shell to live in, and the shell isn't affected at all. Commensalism is a positive, neutral relationship. When one species benefits and the other is not significantly affected, it's called competition. An example would be when a bird and a chipmunk both see the same nut and then they run to it. They both grab it at the same time, but the chipmunk wins and gets the nut. The bird isn't deeply affected because it can just go find a new nut or get new food. Each of these roles have a specific part in benefiting our community to keep our community balanced. The roles help different species to interact, fight, and help each other. The species need one another to survive because each species has something another species need, or they need the same resources. For example, a wolf needs to eat deer in order to survive. If there are more deer than wolves, the wolves can eat more and stay alive. If there are less deer than wolves, the wolves would die because some deer wouldn't have food. This is an example of a limiting factor, which is when the amount of growth is limited because there aren't enough resources. Back to the wolves and the deer. This relationship keeps them at a constant level.
Created using Powtoon.